Coogs House, the only constant in life is change. And it feels like all of a sudden the Big 12 and Houston may be going through a lot of those. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. We should make us first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. If you enjoy the conversation, but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below what the best prank call, I guess that's what started this idea, or prank situation. What's the best prank you've been on either end of? Some funny stories on that one, I'm sure. So let's get into that in the comments down below if you don't know what to say. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. More fun on that later. We got a lot of potential changes to get into. In the last segment, I want to talk some about Tillman Fertitta moving to Italy, somewhat suddenly, somewhat not so suddenly. We'll get into it. Second segment, there's a revolving, moving, constant door in the DB room for Houston. More people leaving, more people potentially coming in. Transfer portal stuff never ceases to move. But first and foremost, Houston and the Big 12 may be about to get some new friends. Now, I want to talk about if the potential Sacramento State ad is a good thing for Houston. But first, as this is Locked On Cougs, not Locked On Sacramento State, you might not know what's happening with Sacramento and all of that. So I do want to talk about what is going on first. Sacramento State has been very public and very forward facing about moving into big time college athletics. They currently have talked about getting themselves into the Pac-12 as soon as possible. But the university president has said that their stretch goal is to get into the Big 12, said that verbatim, and I think that it's worth pointing out that Brett Yormark has talked about expanding westward. They are a West Coast school. They are a city school. Houston and is a city school, and it represents much like Cincinnati. Utah is in Salt Lake. Brett Yormark seems to like adding those kinds of schools. This does not seem out of his wheelhouse. It is a school, though, that'd be going from an FCS-sized athletic department into the Power Four, but they seem to be poised to do it. Some quick hitters on what they've done. They hired Brennan Marion as the head football coach. He was running for FBS jobs. They are paying him like an FBS coach to come in there and coach. They reached out to Michael Vick a year ago, another big name kind of coach trying to jumpstart the program. They formally applied to be in the FBS and are willing to play an independent schedule should they get it. They signed a big-time transfer in Jaden Rashada at quarterback. He was an Arizona State quarterback that I guess also went to Georgia. There was that whole Florida thing in the middle there. That's a big-time name in the transfer portal. They have funded building a new stadium and facilities, which will take time, but are going to be paid for. On the basketball side of things, they've got Mike Bibby as their new head coach. Again, high-profile name, especially in Northern California, where he was a great Sacramento King for such a long time. He coached at high-end prep schools and AAU programs. He's now the head basketball coach there, again, connected to high-end basketball, high schools, and AAU programs. They signed Shaquille O'Neal as the basketball general manager. Big name, obviously carries a lot of weight on the West Coast. His first move as general manager was to sign Mikey Williams in the transfer portal. Yes, that same Mikey Williams that was going to do the Memphis thing with Penny, then to the UCF Central Florida Golden Knights thing, and now is a Sacramento State Hornet. Yes, they're the Hornets. They have a multi-year donation system in NIL that is rumored to be over $50 million. One report indicated they have a liquid $35 million ready to go with a group called the SAC-12. It's unclear if that's in the $50 million over the course of years or if it's just a liquid money to spend right away. But they've got big-time NIL money to go. And again, they're willing to play independent football right now if need be. But it looks like they're heading to the FBS soon and looking for a home. And I'm here to tell you that it's in Houston's best interest that that home is the Big 12. It adds a West Coast stop. We continue to try and move this conference from coast to coast in a manifest destiny kind of way. adding California is important. You're adding those TV markets. You're also adding the northern half of California, where Cal and Stanford, for all of their academic prowess, have kind of crapped the bed and joined the ACC. And so you have a chance to kind of get in a foothold there. Obviously, Sacramento State would need an adjustment period. I think for Houston, that's a good thing as you're rebuilding your football program. It's a program you can go kind of beat up on a little bit as a conference win. It's also, again, a unique road trip. You can tell your fans, you can tell your recruits, that you're going to be playing as far east as West Virginia, Central Florida, Cincinnati, as far north as whichever the Iowa State, Kansas schools you got that year, and as far west as California or Arizona. I think that's an important thing when you're talking about the reach of the conference from coast to coast. I think that the present version of college football is also the easiest one for a program to rebuild itself quickly in. That is to say that if they really have all this money that it appears that they do have in Sacramento, that they'll be competitive soon. And so you kind of put the team on a similar rebuilding track as Houston. I think that the novelty of that works well. Those first couple of years will be a big story on ESPN, and those first big wins and all that kind of helps spread the conference love in a big way. I think you have to assume that much like Houston and other non-Power 4 schools have when they join the Big 12, they'll take a smaller share of the TV dollars. That's all to be worked out, obviously, if this thing ever happens. But I don't think it'll hurt Houston financially in the sense that they'll be taking a smaller chunk of whatever the big pot of money is at the end. And finally, I think the other reason this helps Houston is Houston would benefit from a bigger conference, would continue to benefit from a true West Coast conference, a coast-to-coast conference. And I think that Sacramento State, much like Houston, much like Colorado, much like Arizona, much like Utah, much like BYU, much like Cincinnati, much like Central Florida, Sacramento would not come alone, I don't think. I think this would be a great way to convince the San Diego States of the world, the UNLVs of the world, the Boise States of the world, that it is worth taking a smaller initial cut to come to the Big 12 and work your way up that full conference revenue share. Because frankly, you'd have a travel buddy of sorts with you in coming to the conference. Houston didn't necessarily need a local travel buddy, although they did bring 3 other schools in at the same time. But Houston's in the state of Texas, where there were already, I guess at the time, 4 Big 12 schools, not 3 Big 12 schools. I think that all of this adds up to being good for Houston. I also am intrigued by Shaquille O'Neal, Mike Bibby, and NIL dollars building a Northern California basketball school, as Houston is competitive at the highest levels in basketball, obviously. That offers another place to test yourself, the same way adding Arizona did, the same way AJ DeBonsa going to BYU does, right? I think that's a key thing in this as well. I'm excited about the possibility of this, though, because they're doing so many things very quickly, very decisively, and very intentionally to build up their athletic program. It feels like the chance to get on the ground floor of a big-time company where the stock price will be rising. I think this is the kind of thing where you're going to see whatever conference they join into, if it's not a current Power 4 conference, I don't see another conference being able to hold on to them for very long. Right. They're serious about the investment. They're serious about what they're doing there. And they said themselves, per the university president, that they have a stretch goal of getting to the Big 12. Offer them that goal at a lower percentage, have them work their way up, work through those, lumps and speed bumps, let Houston and other schools in the conference benefit along the way. Also, let's throw in that West Coast trip. Let's get to Sacramento. Let's get to California. And let's continue to make this a true coast-to-coast 4-time zone conference. Look, if that's going to be a benefit of the Big 12, let's lean on into it. Now, some more localized things for Houston involve the transfer portal and the revolving door that is the defensive back room. And those are changes that might not be quite exciting, but we might think of it as being exciting a year from now. Let's get into it first, though. Our show today is brought to you by our buddies over at Monarch. money. Now, if you ever check your bank account and we're like, where do my money go? Dining out, shopping, entertainment, or redoing the stuff behind me as far as my backdrop goes, which will be done soon. We're putting stuff together for that. Monarch Money is your personal CFO that helps you get full visibility and control over your finances. It's not just a budgeting app, though. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your bank accounts, investments, spending all in one place. Stop managing money. You can start building actual wealth. I like it's all these things in one app. It's very centralized, very simple. I'm not a big tech person. I need a single app to get all my things done in a single dashboard. That's all right there on Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off of your first entire year. Programs with Locked On Cougs here. Now, all the things changing around Houston, potentially the Big 12 and more. And in the football program, it seems that Houston losing another defensive back to the transfer portal. Keionte Scott, who I frankly was surprised stood on the roster this long, is in the transfer portal officially. I personally had thought that because we'd gotten to April 28th with him on the roster, we'd probably keep him on the roster. He announced his portal decision, I guess, on, was it Monday, Tuesday, earlier this week, and he is in the transfer portal. That makes 4 defensive backs from Houston having entered the portal since the day before the spring game, which is kind of crazy when you think about that being like 10 days ago. That's a lot. Keionte Scott enters the portal. Maurice Williams, the highly touted recruit that came to Houston a couple years ago, he is now transferring to Arizona State, it appears, per his social media accounts. Maurice was, again, a guy liked by a lot of Houstonians because of how much he put on for the city. He heads out of town, out of state, but within the conference to Arizona State. I'm the kind of guy that likes rooting on our guys and they go elsewhere as long as they aren't playing Houston. I only hope for the best for Maurice, but that's going to be a tough pill to swallow. We see him in conference. Jeremiah Wilson is committed to FSU. Jeremiah Wilson was the top corner in the state by some people returning to college football. One of the top corners in the country returning to college football. He's transferred to Florida State after entering the transfer portal the day before the spring football game. And that's great for him. They were not very good last year. I still have the Peach Bowl shirt from when Houston beat Florida State. My memory is not that bad. I remember that game, but I'm sure there's a bunch of reasons to go there. Jeremiah Wilson heading to FSU. He was originally an ACC guy, though, so maybe that's the vibe there. It appears that A.J. Halsey, who went to the transfer portal shortly after the spring game, seems like he's heading to Miami. He's got pictures on social media of himself in and around pools and beaches in Miami as we speak. By the time we're listening to this, he actually might have already committed. His Tuesday night Instagram story was a picture of he and Rick Ross at a nightclub. Rick Ross is a Miami-based hip-hop artist, rapper, hip-hop artist. That artist is even being loose there. And I say that to say that it feels like he went there because Zach Etheridge is the DB coach at the University of Miami now. Etheridge had a big impact on the great year Halsey has, a first-team All-Big 12 performer last year. Keionte Scott, if I were a person that bet on these kinds of things, I'd bet on Scott also ending up at Miami. Scott had a great 2 years at Auburn under Zach Etheridge, had a bad year at Auburn without Zach Etheridge, came to Houston theoretically to play with Zach Etheridge. Etheridge then left for Miami mid-spring, and I'd imagine that's where Keionte Scott is going. Now, that all sucks, but I want to point out one thing before I move into names coming in, and that is none of these guys chose Texas Tech. Texas Tech is, where Sheil Wood, the old defense coordinator, went. Look, these DBs are all very good, highly touted recruits. Halsey and Wilson, big-time play for Sheil Wood in the system last year. Sheil Wood took the defense coordinator job up at Texas Tech. You think you'd understand what an all-Big 12 caliber performer A.J. Halsey is. Texas Tech has tons of oil money to spend on anything they want in the transfer portal, apparently. And while that's happening, none of these guys even sniffed around at Tech. And I think, for what it's worth, we're looking at like all the discussion about Shieldwood leaving in November, very suddenly. I think this tells you a lot. And I hadn't talked to anyone on the team, hadn't talked to one of the coaching staff about Shieldwood. I frankly had never talked to Shield myself. But I think based on the vibes he got from people when he left and the vibes you're getting from seeing where people are going, feels fairly telling that they didn't follow him to Tech. Now, those are guys that are gone, and this is Locked on Cougs, not Locked on guys that used to be Cougs. And I think that it's worth pointing out that Houston's looking at replacing guys fairly immediately with guys that have a real chance to make an impact at the Power 4 level and have not yet. I've got down that Rook Brown is crystal balled by several to come to Houston. He is the 5'11", 185-pound corner from Wyoming. Now, Keionte Parks is a more talented corner already signed with Houston from Wyoming. I do think it's worth pointing out, though, that these guys have played together. And it's not that Rook Brown was bad at Wyoming. He just wasn't quite as good as his opposite counterpart. Rook Brown is from Salado, which is in Central Texas. It'd be a coming home of sorts for him to get back to Texas. I think that's a big, big deal. I think that Blake Thompson is a name to keep an eye on as well. He was a Big 12 caliber guy out of high school. He went to Iowa State. He's from Missouri City. He went to Fort Penelope, I believe. 6'1", 190-pound safety. Good PFF scores in his year as a starter at Louisiana Tech, which is where he was for his junior season last year. I cannot tell based on stuff I've got here where his red shirt happened there. But he is a guy that is looking at Houston, would be coming home, would be getting back to the Big 12, getting back into the Power 4. And I like his game a lot. I'm really high on Blake Thompson for what it's worth. I know Louisiana Tech does not play at the highest levels of football, but it's also in the same backyard area that Willie Fritz is really familiar with, for whatever that is worth. So keep an eye on Blake Thompson there. That's a big-time signing if they get that done. Brian Nelson would also be one, 6 foot, 190-pound corner. Changed sides throughout the season from boundary to field. Sometimes they went left and right. Positional flexibility in the secondary is a big deal. He's from Pearland Shadow Creek. He's currently just finished up his sophomore year at North Texas and was one of the better players on their defense up there. He's looking to make the jump in the Power 4. Coming home to Houston would be a great way to do that. I know a lot of people, because I can see the comments, because I can see social media, wonder where the big name schools are. We're taking these guys from Group of 5 programs and turning them into Power 4 DBs. And to that I say, yeah, that's kind of what we've done. AJ Halsey was first team all Big 12. Houston plucked the kid and brought him back home to his hometown from New Mexico, right? That's kind of what Houston's done when they've had success in the transfer portal. Keith Cooper just signed a deal with the Detroit Lions. He had 1 year at Houston after playing most of his career at Tulane, right? Like Houston is, Michael Badden's got multiple camp invites after being a Group of 5 linebacker for half a decade, right? Houston's finding these guys, turning them into something. Now, admittedly, the defense is changing under Austin Armstrong, new defense coordinator, but I do think that the complexity there actually would help a guy that's an older veteran, like a Rook Brown, like a Blake Thompson, like a Brian Nelson, like a Zelmar Vader, right, like a Keionte Parks, anybody that they're signing that's got some time under the belt. I think Austin Armstrong's complex defense might actually help, or might actually be helped by, I should say, a more veteran guy with college experience, as opposed to a 4 or 5-star high school kid that's just going to come out here and be having been the best athlete in the field his whole life to this point, right? So I see what they're going for in that sense. I really, really like these guys. I'm telling you right now, I really like Blake Thompson. Again, the Louisiana Tech kid, Big 12 experience, Big 12 recruit out of high school. It was a high-end 3-star prospect. It's still a 3-star transfer. He's also looking at other Power 4 schools. I think Houston needs to continue to play up the coming home to play aspect of this for him. But we'll see. I think each of these guys coming back to Greater Houston, or being from Greater Houston, or I guess Salado being Texas for Rook Brown. I think that needs to continue to be the selling point. We talk all the time about how great Houston would be if they just kept the best recruits in the city, playing for the city. This feels similar. It's just doing it after they've already been in college for a little bit. And so I think that that's where we're going to see all of those things go. I would love to get Rook Brown, Blake Thompson, and Brian Nelson as far as the guys are looking at. I will say if they only get 2 of those 3 guys, they might need to go find a third in the transfer portal with the depth pieces being lost. Like Maurice Williams, for instance, hadn't played a whole lot of snaps for Houston, but he was a high-end recruit. He was depth. That's another thing that you've got to replace. Speaking of replacing, Houston is losing Tillman Fertitta in what has to be the weirdest way possible. We're going to talk about that in 1 second, but first, Parker Andrews, Locked On Coogs here, talking about changes in the Big 12 and Houston alike. And one of the more odd changes has been the saga that is Tillman Fertitta moving to Italy. We have some clarity on that now. President Donald Trump nominated Tillman Fertitta to be the ambassador to Italy. Fertitta is of Sicilian descent. He is, born in Galveston. He's a regional guy, local guy, but he has been nominated and then approved and confirmed as the United States ambassador to Italy, representing his Sicilian heritage. Now, I think that that's great for Tillman. I would never tell. I mean, this is legitimately a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity to go do something very unique and meaningful for both his heritage and his own country and all of that. I'm not one to tell a guy not to do that. It does mean that it looks like it's not a requirement, but it's very common to give up a lot of your stateside interests while you're going to be abroad to give yourself the ability to focus on the tasks at hand while you're over there, right? They also sometimes can be conflict of interests. So Fertitta is going to be giving up his role at the Landry's restaurants and all of the Landry's brand, I guess. And I think that that's important to note that this is not just something he's doing flippantly. He understands this is making a big change. He's going to have to, whenever his ambassadorship is over, find some new ways to get involved. He might end up back at Landry's as well after, but he's going to take a break from it at least for the time being. I did not see any Landry's press release about where they're going to go with that. But the one piece of the press release about Tillman taking this job is that he is going to have to he's going to step down as the chairman of the board at the University of Houston. And that means he'll be less involved in some of these larger decisions being made. He's going to continue to own the Rockets, it sounds like, as far as the functionality of that goes. A lot of that's to a team of people in Houston anyway, and I'm sure that there'll be some communication back and forth. But as far as big decisions go, he's the guy that signs the checks, but he's got a team of people there to help him out with those. But the biggest piece of this for this show, I guess you could argue at a national level, choosing an ambassador is important. But for this show, Locked on Cougs, him stepping down as chair of the board at the University of Houston is a big deal because we've seen him be intimately involved in how each of these hires in recent memory has happened. Now they've made some of those hires, and so the next few years may be okay. They've made the hire in football. They made the hire in tennis. They just made the hire in women's basketball. Volleyball is set. Track is set. Basketball, they're going to continue to do contract extensions and updates with Sampson, as it appears that they're doing presently, where after they exceed expectations every year, they have the conversation, okay, what do you want now? How can we incentivize the contract now, et cetera? And every year there's a little bit of tweaking in this and that, but Sampson's not going anywhere. The tweaking actually, I think, more has to do with making sure we solidify that Kellen is the next head coach when Kelvin steps aside and calls it a career, ultimately because Kellen is going to get options to go elsewhere if they don't, right? Kellen's going to be a sought-after head coaching candidate all the time, but if you put in writing that he can have this job when his dad retires, I think he'll take it 11 times out of 10. That typically is the reworking the contract. I say that all that to say I don't think it's a big deal if Fertitta's not here for that. I don't think that takes a brain surgeon to get done or a high-end businessman to figure out the dollars and cents there, right? But it also feels like in athletics, Houston's going to have some big hires and big moves being made soon. I mean, how long can the baseball and softball programs be rebuilding? How long can it take them to adjust to the Big 12? We've also talked with the folks over at Scott and Holman, did some great reporting on other issues within the softball program, recommending going and checking that out because they cover that fairly thoroughly. If more come to light, we'll obviously have someone, whether it's Bobby or I think Dustin's moved on, but Sam or whoever could come over here and talk with us there too. But it feels like you're going to be making some changes to the bat and ball sports in the next 18 months, certainly in the time that Fertitta will be abroad. And so suddenly he's, not going to be involved in that process. I think he made the right hire in football. I think it looks like they made a great hire in tennis. I'm excited about the women's basketball hire. Fertitta's not going to be as involved in those. I don't think, and I think it's fair to point out, that this means that he won't sign a big check just because he's not in the country. That's not what stepping down as chairman of the board means. It does mean that he's going to have less of a say in the decision by like leaps and bounds in whatever the big check is going towards, and you might be less likely to get the big check out of him if he's not involved in the decision-making process. I think that's where this gets interesting as far as Tillman's involvement in Houston athletics. Again, theoretically, he could see a decision made by the board without him, think it's a great decision, and write a big check. But does Tillman want to be involved in like making a decision before signing the big check? I think we'll find out over the next few years. Might find out over the next few months, honestly, based on how the bat and ball sports go. Look, I'm happy that to date he helped select, or at least what I think are good changes. I think the football program had a great hire in Willie Fritz, and he's already dispelled like the one thing I would have had a problem with about him. He's clearly a more energetic guy, not near the twilight of his career that I thought he would be. He's proven to be that, right? Obviously, tennis program's off to strong footing. I think that the tennis program hire is great. I'm a big fan, if you listen to the show, of the women's basketball hire and Coach Mitchell. I'm a big fan of Kelvin. I'm a big fan of the volleyball program and the toughness they've shown as well. Who wouldn't be a fan of Lewis and the track program? I just worry that the school as a whole is going to have other big decisions to make in other sports. I'd love, Sarah, to talk to you guys about a College World Series run and all of that. But that's not in the cards right now. And I think that, honestly, you're going to have to see some changes being made to do that. What do those changes look like without Fertitta here? It is interesting to me that he's holding on to the Rockets' stake. Like I said, when I was going through the list of things he is and isn't doing, that is, I think, it's a smaller lift on his end than being chairman of the board. So as far as like decision making goes, it's certainly a bigger lift as far as his pocketbook goes. And I think that's a interesting discrepancy he's making. But either way, obviously, as more of those changes happen, if we feel like the Fertitta absence is part of changes happening, we'll be covering it here, just like we cover the DBs changing rooms, just like we cover the Big 12 and all things happening in and around it each and every day. But the everydayers like yourself already knew it. So shout out to the everydayers out there tuning in each and every morning. For the very second listen of the day, I'm recommending Locked On College Basketball right now, mostly because the offseason's always chaotic and turbulent. They're doing a great job of covering it over there. Locked On Coogs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.